Good morning. Welcome everyone that's here to tour the improvements to the water plant facility at 520 East Oak. The tour will begin, and Sean Schroeder will be giving the presentation on the work that's been completed at the water plant so far up to date. He'll be the spokesman, and this will all be filmed, so we'll go through the process and look at the improvements that have been made up to date. So let's get started.
All right, as part of the upgrades to the electrical infrastructure here at the water plant, the existing service used to come in down in the floodplain, and when the river would come up, they used to have to sandbag around the main distribution panel because of the floodwaters. And so as part of the project, we wanted to get the new service out of the floodplain. We brought it up here on top of the hill. And it was also, as part of the project, wanted to be able to add standby power for the plant. So we added a diesel generator in order to pick up loads when the electrical service goes out. So as part of the project, we've got a new pad-mounted transformer that Westar brought in. We've got our new distribution gear here on top of the hill, and this feeds the whole plant. So there's a feed from here that goes to the filter building. Then there's two feeds that go down the hill, one to the high service pump station, and then another one to the low service pump station. So that was basically on the distribution. We were just trying to get everything out of the floodplain and get it up here where it's dry. And as part of that, all the overhead distribution that used to be down in the floodplain, we took all that and put it underground. So it should give you a much more reliable system, since when you have overhead lines, if you have a windstorm come through, you can knock down the lines. There was also overhead copper control wiring, also as part of the original installation. And as part of the new installation, we put in underground fiber optic cables for the new controls. So that way, again, if you have a lightning strike, you won't get anything coming in on your copper control cabling, since we've gone to fiber optic. Of course, glass is an insulator, so don't have any issues with that.
Where's the fuel?
Fuel?
Where's the fuel for the generator?
The fuels is the tank. It sits underneath the tank, the generator itself.
And how long would that run it?
We've got at least a 24-hour tank is what it's sized for, and that's at 75% load. We size the generator for between 70 and 80% load. That way, as things change at the plant, if you add additional processes, you got some spare capacity for additional future loads.
But it handles the whole plant?
It will handle all the loads that the plant needs to operate. Now, the way we've got things set up, since it's at the front end of the plant, it can power any particular load in the plant. So there's 3 high service pumps. The generator size to handle 2 of those at the same time. But if for some reason one of them's down for maintenance, they can switch over to the third one and still run it without having to do any changes to the wiring. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in what you can run. One of the low service pumps is sized for running on the generator. But again, if they're not running the 2 high service pumps, you got capacity, you can switch, they can run the low service pumps. So it really gives you the ability to run any load in the plant. Gives you flexibility, and we've done that because a water plant is kind of a critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I know.
So, and you know, a normal electrical distribution, you would have a separate electrical distribution going to each building. So it would increase the cost for that, and then you're picking a specific load and wiring that, and then that's the only load you can run. Unless you'd have to come in and have to do some temporary wiring if the pump you had, selected was down for any reason. So most of the other things on the site, we replaced the existing lighting around all the basins with LED lighting. So it's definitely helped the operators being able to see when it's dark out here now. And then on the side. Everything else has been put underground. So you really can't see any of it. It's all buried. The other part that we've done is in the filter building. Had an old motor control center there. That was a Federal Pacific motor control center, and it was obsolete. The operators were stealing pieces and parts out of spare buckets in order to keep the existing ones running. So that was all replaced as part of this project also. And we also replaced the branch circuit, 120 volt branch circuit panels. Again, they were Federal Pacific panels, and Federal Pacific has a reputation for breakers not tripping when they need to trip. So it was definitely something that needed to be upgraded.
We're going to see that.
Yes, I think that would probably be the next thing to go.
Okay.
Take a
We're
look
not
at.
standing in the rain.
With the fuel being under the generator, it's not regulated by EPA then, is it?
It's got a double wall fuel tank, and it's got leak detection in it.
Okay.
So, but we tried not to put anything underground for the leak, for those reasons. So, but it is a double wall tank, and it does have leak detection. So, if it does have a leak, we'll be notified of it.
Where's the leak detection monitored inside?
Yes, through the SCADA system. So. All right, well, we're in the filter building now, and as mentioned, there was an existing motor control center on this wall over here that fed all the loads here in the filter building, and we replaced it with a brand new motor control center over here. As part of the project, we kept the plant online during the whole time. We had the existing service down in the floodplain. We kept that in service and brought in and got the new service up here hot. And then the Kelly Electric was able to then cut over each building one at a time. So kept the downtime to a short period of time for the operators and kept the plant in operation. Here in the filter building, we were lucky enough to have space for a new motor control center to be able to set it. And so they did the same thing, is cut one load over at a time. So the whole plant wasn't down for a long period of time. So it worked out very well and able to get that accomplished. Also as part of the project, as you can see, it's nice and bright in here. Kelly Electric replaced all the existing lights with LEDs. So it's been a big boom. If you had seen the plant beforehand, it was always dark in here, and especially down in the high service pump station. It was definitely a big improvement down there. The other part of the project that was done, the city had done a controls upgrade for the filter. That was done as an earlier project, and as part of this project, we're replacing the head end equipment here at the plant, and then also upgrading all the equipment at the remote satellite sites for the pump stations. There the problems had again obsolete equipment that needed to be replaced, and they were having problems with getting parts. So, add anything I missed on that you can think of? So, it's definitely been an improvement from what was here originally, and I'd like to say that, you know, it's been good working with Ed and Terry and the rest of the city, and Kelly Electric has done a really nice job. So,
What's left of this initial phase to complete?
at this point, they've got the testing of the generator, the training for the operators on the generator and the ATSs, and then the controls part of it. All the electrical part is pretty well done at this point.
Okay. So would that be programming equipment? Would that be part of the final process?
Yeah, as far as the settings on the breakers,
Right.
that's part that'll need to be done is when Eaton comes out to do the training.
Okay.
So the study's already been done as far as what those breakers should be set out, so everything's coordinated.
Okay.
So,
All right.
okay.
Thank you.
For the training, do you require it to be videoed
Yes.
so that you'll have
Yes, we-
archives to go back to?
Right. Yeah, we require the training to all be videoed and a copy given to the city, so as you have new operators come on board, they can sit through it. And also, if there's questions after the training, if somebody has something, they can go back to that video. Yeah.
And that's for all the equipment.
Yeah.
Good.
So,
Why do we not go with natural gas on a generator?
going natural gas, if we want natural gas, typically the generator is about 30% bigger and also more expensive because natural gas doesn't have as much BTU capacity. Another issue with natural gas that I have is the fact that it's not an on-site power supply. And so we've had issues, even though we've had a generator connected to natural gas, where the distribution system has had problems. And so it's cut off power or the natural gas service to a site. And so for, to me, as far as the better, what I want to say, to give you
An extra level of reliability.
ability, exactly, I think diesel is the best way. And it's also, like I said, it's a cheaper alternative versus the first cost on the generator.
Does it have to be fired up regularly for testing?
We recommend that the generator be run regularly for testing because, number one, by going through the testing, typically you'll find out if you have an issue.
Right.
And it's better to find out that issue during testing than when you actually have a need to run the generator.
So is that quarterly or?
We recommend that it be done weekly.
Oh, wow.
So, and then once you, at least for the first year, to make sure you run through that you don't have any glitches on anything. And if you do, that's when you want to find them, is when you're doing your testing. So, and then we did have on the generator, since we're up here near the neighborhood, we've got a sound attenuated enclosure, so it's much quieter than a normal diesel generator set. So,
Won't bother the animals at the zoo.
hopefully not.
Is there any problem with diesel long-term storage in the tank of it needing to be changed out or going bad or?
Well, typically the diesel should be treated, and then also by doing regular exercising, you'll turn over that diesel fuel, and that's another reason to do your testing is to make sure you're using that fuel up so it doesn't go bad on you.
And then to refill the tank, you just call one of the local.
Yeah, you call their supplier.
Yeah, it's a 1,000-gallon tank, and it does have a stabilizer in it. We'll run a bunch of that out with a 6-hour load test.
Yeah. And then you can refill, like, say it's more than 24 hours, you have to shut the generator down to refuel the tank, or they can just come out and,
No, they should just be able to come out and fill it.
so it's not like you got to panic after 24 hours.
No. And then that run time all depends on how much loaded the generator is. So we always take the worst case because we don't know what's going to all be running at the same time. So depending on, the actual loading on the plant, it may only be 50% loaded. So you're going to get much more extended run time on it.
All that reads back to the SCADA system in here.
Yes.
The startup and all is handled in here too? Or?
Well, the startup, there's out in the gear sitting outside, there's an automatic transfer switch. And so what it does is it monitors the normal utility power. And when it sees a loss of utility power, then it automatically sends a signal to the generator to start the generator. And then once the generator is up to speed, it'll go ahead and switch over. Now, once the SCADA system sees the signal that we're on generator power, to shut the plant down and then start bringing on loads one at a time. Since the generator isn't rated to run everything in the plant, we're limited to what we can run. So the SCADA system will control what loads the operators can bring on, so we don't end up overloading the generator and shutting it down.
And the weekly test or monthly test later on, is that activated just by the operator, or is it computer controlled that automatically it will?
It can be set to be run automatically, or the operators can manually initiate a test. So you have that flexibility. And then you can also set that test for whenever it's the best time to run, you know, if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it may be. So.
So it's pretty foolproof. Sometimes, you know, it's just like changing oil in your car. You intend to forget, and when you start hearing noise in your car, that's when I got to check the oil. You don't want to wait that. You don't want to wait too long and then it not operate. So you can set it.
Well, that's why we recommend doing the regular testing to catch anything that may go wrong. Because we've had projects where they run the test and they'll find they got a bad relay or something like that. And they get that replaced so that when they actually do have a need, the generator will be there. So.
Where does service come to work on the generator? How far? Is that Wichita, Kansas City? It's not anyone local, is it?
We'd have to double check. Is Kelly, Randy? Is service for the generator coming out of Wichita?
Yes.
Okay. So.
This is pretty critical, but you don't want to wait until there is a crisis and then look at the scheduling.
Right, and that's why, like I said, if you're running it weekly, if you run into issues, should be able to discover them then. So.
I can give you an example, but I'm not going to do it on camera.
I think the times we've been out here, the staff is really efficient with the plant. I think you guys have been really efficient on operating the plant, doing preventative maintenance ahead of time, then it's really not going to be an issue.
We've got a decent pump at the airport that exercises once a week. Automatically it moves and runs for 30 minutes.
Okay. So
This will be set up the same way.
Okay. I didn't know we had one out there, so you're pretty much up to speed on how this will take.
We've got a diesel, the high series is what the manual is very in it.
The fact that you were able to cobble parts to keep the plant operational all this time, you know, speaks highly of you guys. Ingenuity and being able to, to do what you got to do to keep it running when you knew you were relying on spare parts and hopefully that they would perform and function as
We were at the point we robbed everything we could get.
yeah.
Finding parts, you find them through eBay, and they're very expensive.
You can imagine. Okay. I was working for West Park. We have a generator on site, and we never did program it to run like weekly, so we had an outage. And I got there, my boss was already there, even though I can't remember who the boss was. So it didn't start up. So I'm back there with jumper cables in my pickup truck, and we're jumping the generator to get it started, so it'll trigger the emergency lights in the building. But I said, this doesn't look good for a start. Not a good moment, and it went on camera. Anyway.
Well, that's why you're running. Make sure you
Yeah.
know your batteries are running,
Yes.
your battery chargers working. We've had generators not start
Sure.
because the batteries have died.
You know, this one here, the
So-
battery was dead. It's just that they never did program it to operate once a week or once a month or whatever.
Right.
It just sat there. When it came time to trigger, battery was dead.
Right. So, it'd be like letting your car sit for
Sure.
6 months and then
Sure.
going out there and hoping it starts. So,
So that's good. It's a good process. So I think maybe while we're here, we have time. Maybe tour the rest of the plant.
I said that would be
Possible.
Ed.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to go back outside?
No.
Let's start in the last.
Yeah. Yeah, just right there. And then just kind of do a walkthrough.
Can you wear the mic?
This is our laboratory. We test water every 2 hours. On the clarifier, filters, chlorine residuals. Got a man here around the clock, 7 days a week. He can also monitor the plant from this SCADA system here. It shows. This is the water coming in from the low surface. It comes into the clarifier, into the bases, and into the filters. From this point on, everything is gravity fed until it gets to the high surface pumps. Then it's pumped out to 4 different towers.
Which tower is that?
That's the airborne tower. It should be on, they called in this morning, probably middle of next week.
Is that the one we were painting?
Yeah.
Is that going on now?
Yeah, they're doing that right now. They should finish it middle of next week, they said. We'll go outside and I can show you some of the chemical feed. This is our potassium permanganate. We feed it to kill the microbiome in the river, or as first comes into the plant. Then over here, we add the liquid alum and the polymer to the clarifier. That's to remove any of the mud.
And
That's the
the
clarifier
first,
from
the
far north, far north. As the water gets harder, we'll start that line machine. But we've only ran it 4 days this year because we've had so much rain. 4 days. And I'll take you up here and show you the filter room.
So much brighter in here.
Oh,
my
man,
gosh.
yeah.
I remember.
I couldn't hear you very well in there. You said because we've had so much rain, we've only run it 4 days. This
4 days, that's all we've run the line machine. Because the alkalinity's been so low. Before we started the liquid alum, we were going through a tank of lime a month.
Wow.
We haven't ordered any lime this year.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
This is our filters. This is the upgrade we did on them. It's all touch. The old one was all, pneumatic, and it was starting to fail as well. So we can start and stop these pumps from right here. Just push a button and we can open the valve and reverse the flow on this filter and clean it. We do one every other night. It takes about 20 minutes to clean one. Then we let it rest, and the next night we'll bring it back on and take another one out. Backwash it. From this point on, the water's gravity fed down to the clear wells, which picks up the water and sends it out to the distribution center. All of our pump stations and tanks. We have 2 pump stations and 4 towers. Anything else?
So I have a question about the towers. There are 4 towers. One is currently being maintained, so we're operating the water system with 3 towers right now, am I correct? And that's adequate. So we have the ability to take a tower out for maintenance and still maintain the correct water pressure and supply.
Right, right.
What point does it start to affect the water pressure?
Excuse me?
The water pressure can go down.
The tower itself maintains the water pressure. We've got 3 extra towers. As long as we keep the pressure, the levels on the towers maintained, we won't lose any pressure. We typically run about 75 pounds pressure on the system. Now, if we fill up that new tower completely, we'll start blowing lines. We've got to be careful with
I
it.
want to do that.
It's a tall tower.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Do you want to walk through kind of maybe what the phase 2 proposed, the work for phase 2 is, and they can kind of see what all that includes, physically have eyes on it before we go just talk about it?
Yeah. Let's do that.
You wanna do that?
We're going to talk about it. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Do you want to do that, or do you want me to?
I'll let you do
You'll
that.
let me do that? Okay. You have to wear the mic.
You got it all drawn up, don't you?
I got what?
You got all the paperwork on it.
About was considered phase 1 for the water treatment plant improvements, and so we sat down with city staff when we were here last month for our progress meeting and talked about the items that are kind of the next needs on the list for what phase 2 would look like. As you know, you got a KDHE loan for a certain amount, of it's 3.1 million, and what we utilize for this project comes out of that, and then what's left over and any additional that you might need would be kind of what the next phase would look like. So I thought we'd just kind of walk through the plant, and I kind of go through the things that staff had identified as the next items. That way you can kind of see what we're talking about before we just go talk about words on paper. Okay. So the first item, one of the items on the list we'll talk about is a new coating for the floor in the entire building here. You can see, as you noticed when we were down there, it's in pretty rough shape. It just gets used over, the lifetime of the facility. So putting a nice new epoxy coating on here that is protective and then also easy to clean as well. So that's one thing here in this building. I think that's really the only thing in this building. Everything else is other facilities out there. So it was not included in the phase 2 stuff we talked about last time. We talked about a new chemical building, and so with the new chemical building, you'll notice that there's chlorine out here, there's alum in here, there's several different places for chemical feed. One of the things that we talked about was getting that into one space, and what that would necessitate most likely is moving the parking lot, because there's only so much space to put a new building. So we'd be looking at maybe putting a new parking lot on the other side of this building where there is space for that. So we want to have a nice parking lot for everybody to be able to park into for staff and then visitors as well. The other things, the settling basins outside, which is where the water comes in initially, those settling basins are showing some signs of leakage. And so staff thinks it would be important to get in there and take a look at those basins and see where that leakage is coming from and how bad it is. We did that under the phase 1. If you'll remember, the first part of phase 1 was actually a study to kind of look at several different things. One of those things was draining the larger basin to the north and looking at the clarifier as well to identify the same kinds of issues. So we've done this once before, and now it's time to do it on the other settling basins. So that was included in this phase 2. We also have included in phase 2 is looking at some of the permitting that is required by KDHE. So the city received a letter noting some permits that seem to not be in the system for the discharge of what comes out of the plant. So the waste streams out of the plant. So for instance, as Ed had talked about backwashing these filters, when that backwash water drains out of the system, it's connected to a discharge that is currently not permitted through KDHE to the river. So we need to go through that process with KDHE to get figure out the best way best place to take that water and get the permit put into place. The second is we have the residuals lagoon where any of the solids off the system go to, and those lagoons again, they discharge to the river, and that is not on file somehow with the state. Who knows? You know, that we've come across these several plants recently where it just was never put into place. So we just go through that permitting process with KDHE. It's basically preparing a report for them of what the system is, what we're sending, where we're sending it, all of that, and then they review that process. So we're not changing anything, don't intend to change anything with the way the city does things with the lagoon system, but we need to go through the actual permitting process with KDHE.
So back when we built this facility, perhaps those permits weren't required or something?
Could have been, it's hard to say. I don't know if you got any additional information from KDHE. All I've seen is the letter, so I don't.
Coffee Bill's in the same situation.
Yeah,
They've
Coffee
been doing
Bill's.
it for years as well.
We're doing a project with the water treatment plant in another city that in northeast Kansas. It's we just went through this exact same thing with them. So I guess is KDHE is maybe just cleaning some of that stuff up, and so that's why a lot of people, you know, are kind of seeing that process. So it's not anything the city has necessarily, you know, done wrong over the years. It's just, hey, somewhere along the paper trail that got missed, so we're just going back and fixing it. Let's see, I think those are the major, two other things. So one, Sean earlier had talked about how obviously the area down by the river is prone to flooding, and so we brought the electric service up here. The high service pump station, which is the pump station that takes the finished water and pushes it out to town, is down in that location as well. And so right now, anytime that river gets up, the city has to sandbag that door to make sure that no water gets into that building. And so what we're looking at is some sort of more permanent type solution. Specifically, we've talked about looking at maybe special doors or some sort of like little wall around that entrance to make sure, you know, so they're not having to sandbag every time there's something in place already to protect that building. And then the other thing is the sludge line off the clarifiers. So, you know, as the clarifier works, all the sludge settles to the bottom, clean water settles to the top. And that sludge that comes off of there, the line that takes that from there to the sludge lagoons right now needs to be replaced. And so we have in our phase 2 work is scheduled to replace that line, a certain section of it that is in need of repair. So.
Was your survey that was listed in phase 2?
Correct.
Is it total site or is it limited to area?
What we have right now is basically all the area that we would be interfacing with, which is a good chunk of the plant. So we've got survey over here on the other side of the building where we would need to put a new parking lot if we're going to utilize the space over here for the chemical feed building. Obviously the area we're going to put the chemical feed building, we have to survey where the sludge line is going to be going. So almost the entire site ends up being included in that survey piece.
I wonder why you didn't just do the entire site.
We can, it's not necessary for the work that we're doing, so we limited it to our specific scope, but if that's something the city would like to entertain, to just go ahead and have our guys do the whole property, you know, to a certain, like the extent of the fence line or something like that, we can certainly do that.
Then if there's ever anything in the future, they're all tied together in one document.
Correct.
Not come back out and have to resurvey.
Yep, we can look at that for you. I mean, I can give you what a cost would be. Since they're already out here, it's not a whole lot more to go ahead and do the extra little bit, so.
Do you have a survey crew or do you use a consultant?
We do. Actually, it would be our survey crew out of our Pittsburgh office that would come here. We have survey crews in Topeka and Wichita as well, but Pittsburgh obviously is our closest, so they would be the ones that would be doing that work.
I know if you contracted, we have a local surveyor too, so.
We have, right now it's based on using our folks, but if that's something you want to talk about, we can. The other thing that's in there as well is geotechnical borings. We're going to do a couple, one for where we would be putting the chemical feed building for foundation design, and then also down by the lagoons. In the previous permitting that we've done with the city, with other cities, KDHE's required a soil boring just to see what the soil conditions are like. So we know that that's something they're going to ask for, so this includes doing that one as well.
So lagoon, you're testing for permeability and
We're not, yeah. At that point, KDHE is not going through the lagoon design itself. It's strictly just the discharge point. but they do want to see just a soil boring for the area close to the lagoon. It's not, we're not doing any permeability testing or anything like that, and it's just so they have the actual soil log is all they've requested in the past. And then the other thing that our phase 2 work includes, of course, is anything related to the loan. So that involves, the very first step in this whole design process for KDHE was to prepare a preliminary engineering report, or a PER, and what that does is basically just tells them these are the issues that we're going to fix, or these are the issues and this is how we propose to fix them, so that they have an idea of where we're headed with our design. And so we would want to update that report because we had submitted that to KDHE at the beginning of this project, and this phase 2 includes some stuff that was not included in that originally. So we'll just have to update that. In the past, that's been just kind of an amendment to the report. So not a huge piece of that, but we do need to do that to keep up with the loan requirements. And then, of course, during, once we get initial estimates put together for all the phase 2 work, we look at that compared to the amount that's currently left on the loan. And then if there is an increase in the loan that's required to be able to, make sure we cover everything, we'll go through that paperwork with KDHE as well. That's an amendment form. It is strictly a paperwork piece, but it is something that has to be done. And then during phase 2, just like we have done during phase 1, we'll do all of the KDHE paperwork and loan requirements that are necessary to keep up with the payments. So there are forms that have to be filled out. We have to review wage rate, payroll, forms from the city or from the contractors and all of that. We put together the disbursement reforms and send everything to Lacey so that she has everything she needs to send into KDHE to be able to get your disbursement payments.
So everything we do under the loan program is subject to Davis-Bacon
Correct.
wage determination.
It is. It is also subject to American Iron and Steel requirements. So we had to, for all the stuff in phase 1 that fell underneath that requirement, and we had to get certificates noting that those steel components were made in the United States. And so same thing on anything that we would do with this phase 2 work, which would primarily be just if we do a new building, anything that would be associated with that, but we do have those requirements as well with the loan. Anything that I missed, Ed? I think that was it.
Good.
And then, of course, we do the way that we structure the contract right now is the same we had done previously, where it includes the services to make sure that we bid the project, and then also the construction administration like we've been doing here as well. The monthly progress meetings dealing with any questions the contractor has and all of that exact same stuff we've been doing this time around as well. So, any questions about the parts and pieces that were included in phase 2 at this time?
So the building that's being proposed is just a chemical storage building. You're not going to remove the liquid alum out to there and feed it into the building.
We would be looking to house all that chemical feed in one building.
So the alum is going to go out there to this room.
We'd be looking at what all our options were. With these individual chemicals, when you start putting them together, we have to put them in individual rooms. So we'd be looking at, what the best options were for what all would be best to put out there in a separate chemical feed building. Do you have anything to add to that about the chemical feed building?
It'd be mainly for the chlorine.
Primarily for the chlorine.
The new chlorine system in that building.
So the chlorine has the ton cylinder sitting out here on the dock right now. So we would be able to put all of that into a structure with the feed equipment, because cylinders are out there, the feed equipment's in here. Everything's kind of separated.
So the alum is still going to stay in
Yeah,
here.
I'll stay there. It'll be the
That
chlorine.
way we can monitor pressure a lot easier. It's just mainly for the chlorine.
The alum isn't a hazardous material like the chlorine.
No.
Control the
The only
gas.
hazardous material we have is probably sodium chloride. And it's enclosed in its own concrete
Sounds
structure.
fine.
And that chlorine building, it'll have a containment in case there's a...
Yeah, the city uses
Steel.
gases. We have ton cylinder currently with the gas cylinders. So it's a gas, so it would be more, the containment would be basically the scrubber system if it's required. for if there was a leak, to the atmosphere.
Just get farther away from the staff if there was a.
Can't get too far away.
Right.
They'll have to come back and pull it in the building.
Give you a degree of safety if there was an issue with that. At least it's not in the building anymore. It's its own contained
Correct.
building.
Yeah, and again, we don't want to go too far because everything else, we want to be able to
Sure.
feed into the existing system and not have to do too much with everything else other than storage. So.
Any other questions?
We're going to convene in 10 minutes in the other building, right?
Yeah.
So we can continue there.
Yeah. So with that, that'll end the tour of the water plant facilities and the upgrades, and we will resume meeting at 10 o'clock in the Veterans Room at Memorial Hall. All right, thank you. Okay, it's 10:03, and we're calling the meeting back in session. The items that we're going to discuss here are item 3, Item 4, consider a contract with PEC for design services for Phase 2 of the water treatment plant project. And we have Terry Liebarger, and we have Sarah Unruh, who is representing PEC, and you will be going over the information that we're going to be considering today in this work session. All right, Sarah, glad to have you here.
Thank you. So we provided last week a draft contract for everybody to take a look at. Wanted to have staff to look at it, make sure we didn't miss anything from our previous conversation of what items needed to be included in the Phase 2 work, and then also present it to the commission and city staff for review. As we talked about at the water treatment plant, we kind of went through what all the parts and pieces of it are, but I'll just quickly go through all of the tasks to kind of give you a summary of those first, and then open it up for any questions that you have for me over the contract. So the first task that we have in here is a project management task. That obviously includes any of the design meetings and those kinds of things that we will have with the city, with city staff coming to present to city commission, providing minutes and records of any of the meetings that we do have, keeping track obviously of scope, schedule, and budget, those kinds of things. This also includes our initial visit with all of our design professionals to come out and take a look at the individual pieces of the project. So our structural engineers, electrical engineers, all of that to come out and take a look at the project initially. So that's the project management item. Our second item on here is the site survey. Some of the work that is included in the design tasks will require that we survey the site so that we know exactly where things are at. And so this includes all of the specific tasks that are involved with doing that actual site survey work. And the next one is the geotechnical investigations. One of the design tasks includes a new structure, so we want to do a geotechnical boring so we have a good idea of what the soil is like, so we design the foundation correctly for that building. There's also a soil boring that is required near the existing residuals lagoons as part of a KDHE permitting discussion. So this includes those 2 subsurface borings for those purposes. Task 4 in the contract is the state revolving loan fund assistance. The Phase 1 improvements were funded under a KDHE SRLF loan, and the intent, from my understanding, is to go ahead and continue with the Phase 2 underneath that loan. So this task involves all of the things that KDHE will require us to do as part of that process, as part of utilizing the loan funds for the Phase 2 work. So that includes updating the preliminary engineering report that we provided to KDHE previously with any additional work that was not included in that initial report, because there are new things that have come up since the initial report was done that need to be taken care of, so we need to update that report. If a loan amendment is required to increase the loan amount to cover all the Phase 2 work, there's paperwork that's involved with that. And then all of the tasks that are required to administer the loan and keep track of things that KDHE requires during the construction process. So all of that is included in the SRLF assistance task of the contract. Task 5 has to do with residuals and solids handling. This is to address a letter that the city received from KDHE just noting that we need to clean up some permitting with the discharges from the residuals lagoon and a discharge from the filter backwash system. So this task involves doing all of the field investigation work and then the report that KDHE requires and filling out the actual new permit application forms and going through that process with KDHE. And that kind of covers 5 and 6. So 5 specifically talks about the residual solids handling, and 6 is this filter backwash, but it's all involved in the same report and permitting process with KDHE. Task 7 is the clarifier sludge line replacement. There is a line that takes the sludge off the bottom of the clarifier and takes it to the system that takes it to the lagoons for handling. That line is about 150 feet of it is in need of replacement. And so this project, or this design task, will be all of the design that's required to replace that line. Task 8 is rehabilitation of the clear wells. To the interior of the clear wells is showing some signs of leakage, and so what the city wants to do is take a look at those and see if we can figure out exactly where things are coming in, what's happening, and how bad it might be. And determine what some repair options would be for those clear wells. This task does include us kind of determining what some options are, whether those tanks have to be taken out of service in order to inspect them, or if we've got a dive or a robotic option for those clear wells. So part of our initial piece of that task would be to investigate what the options are for doing that actual visual observation first, and then making the determination of the best option going forward and getting those inspected. And then based on what is found from that, this task also includes putting together specifications and drawings for the repair work. Task 9 is the high service pump station flood protection. As we talked about out there at the water treatment plant, the high service pump station is located down by the river, and so when the river comes up, that area is prone to flooding. The city currently has to sandbag around the doors into the high service pump station to make sure that flood waters don't get in there. And so this task is going to look at a couple different options and prepare design plans for the option that is selected to put in some sort of permanent flood protection. We note in here the 2 options that we're intending to look at this time are, one, if there's some sort of special doors, sealed doors or something that we could put on there, or some sort of wall around that entranceway to make sure that flood waters do come up, that they don't get into the building. Task 10 is filter building floor coating. We noticed as we were in the water treatment plant that just the coating on the floor inside that filter building just needs to be redone. It's just worn over time. And so that task just basically includes putting together a specification and a plan sheet directly related to that floor coating. And then the last design task is relocation of chemical feed, as we talked about at the water treatment plant. City wants to get the chlorine feed system and the storage of that chlorine and the chemical feed and the feed for that chlorine system into a new building. What that would look like from our initial evaluation is a new structure to the east. Okay, good. That's what I was going to say. I don't want to be wrong. To the east of the existing building that would take up some of basically take up the parking area that is over there right now. And so we'd be looking at with this design task to put a new parking lot in on the west side where there is space currently that is unused. Land area that's unused to the west of the building where a new parking lot would go. The last 2 tasks that are included in this contract are for bidding services and construction administration services. So the bidding services is where we put the project out for bid on our website and deal with getting all the plans and specifications distributed to any prospective bidders, answer their questions, issue addendums if necessary. We attend the bid opening, and then we provide to the city a letter of recommendation after we review all the bid information. KDHE also has requirements with the loan of information and checklists that has to be put together after the bid is completed, so we do all of that work as well. And then once a contract is awarded, we move into construction administration, where we address any questions from the contractor. We review submittals, we review pay applications, we attend progress meetings out here during construction, and basically do everything, all the administrative side of construction during the project. In our previous contract, we had a separate line item for inspection. We don't have inspection in this right now. I think making sure we know exactly what all is going to be done, and then make the determination of what inspection might look like for that project. Because there's a lot of things in here that aren't necessarily designed that need to be dealt with during construction. So really, when we get to a final construction project, then we can make a determination of what would be best for inspection services, and then you guys we can talk about that contract when that time comes. What we had done in our previous contract was basically on the inspection side, we done it as a separate line item, and it was a total value. We did an hourly plus reimbursable expenses not to exceed value. And we would probably do something similar to that again as a supplemental to this contract when the time comes. So that's all the items in the contract the draft that we had put together. So do you have any questions about any of the scope items or anything else in the contract?
There were some suggested modifications from our attorney. We haven't seen the revised contract yet. Will that come later?
Yeah, my understanding was that we were going to kind of talk through the draft contract today, and then we would provide a final contract after we had that initial discussion.
Okay.
So yes, those will be addressed
Okay.
in that final contract. Correct.
So then our item for action would really be at a later date.
That's probably.
Discuss it and kind of work that out, and then
Yeah.
table action, and then
Okay.
approve the contract when it's ready to be approved.
Okay, good.
Was my
Okay.
suggestion.
Well, we talked about the site survey, doing a total site. Will that affect the cost much, or do you need to check?
I will double check. I doubt it, but I will double check. I'll
Okay.
need to check with our survey and see what that would do.
Okay, and then we do have a local survey company, but selecting your consultants, we would like to use local people if possible, but leave that up to you to decide.
Sure, the contract right now is based on using our crews out of Pittsburgh. So if you guys want to utilize your own firm in town instead, that's perfectly fine. We can take that piece out of our contract, and then we would just basically be receiving their information and utilizing that for our design work if you'd prefer to do it that way.
Yeah, I think that would be good. We have Cornerstone here, and they're already on site, and everything that we can keep local if we can is a plus for the community and the economy here. So yeah, if that's not a problem, I think that's a good way to proceed.
So
But
would
then-
you want? I'm sorry.
The scheduling, though, we don't want, I don't know, we don't know their workload
Right.
too, so.
So would you want it structured where we just receive their information, or do you want us to actually put them in as a subcontractor under our contract with you?
Like
Do you want to contract with them separately, or do you want it as a sub under ours?
a sub under yours,
Okay.
then you're in charge of them providing you what you need
Okay.
and in the time schedule you need.
Okay.
On task 8, the clear well, you talked about options to solve the problem. The structural analysis of the basin bottom was provided earlier in phase 1. Is that what you drained and did some boring or core samples?
Yes, and the contact basins, and I didn't, is that included in this?
This was the interior. We were talking about inspecting the interior of the clear wells.
Well, the contact basins, remember where we did the borings? And we need to rehabilitate those too, so that needs to be in here.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that was probably my fault from our last meeting, because I didn't, and the work on the clarifier itself, that was,
Yeah, we're talking about different things here. That's why I
Yes,
was confused from where we
well,
did the
in
drainage
original,
with the borings.
we did the borings on the contact basins to look at the concrete, because we have some leakage there that we need to address, and some upgrades, well, really not upgrades, but rehabilitation of the clarifier. But since then, we have noticed some leakage on the clear wells,
We hadn't
which-
even looked at those before, right?
right,
No.
which are down below the hill.
Oh, okay.
That's where the finished water's stored. And
And
we're,
the round,
the round
towers.
tanks.
Okay, well, that's where I was
We're-
confused in the
We're seeing some
terminology.
leakage there, so we thought it'd be a good time to get in and evaluate those and see what we need to do a coating on them or rehabilitate them somehow to
Okay,
make sure we're good for another 100 years.
well, that's where I was confused with the terms, because I thought, one of the options where we tested up
Yeah,
was looking
and
at a
that-
liner, but these are vertical walls, so it'd be a different
Right.
process.
Yeah, that's why.
And that was my, last time we met, I gave her these additional tasks and kind of skipped over what we'd already done, so.
So are we going to add another task to address the leakage?
What we
Up
can
there,
do,
or
we can
where?
just modify this particular task to make sure that we're clear that, okay, so we're going to definitely, we've already come up with what a solution might be for the contact basins. We did that as part of the initial, report that we did during the first phase. So this task then will include preparing design plans for that and then inspection of the clear wells down below.
Okay.
And then once we determine what the necessary repair methods are for those clear wells, then we can, add that into the scope. It's just, we just don't know exactly what all that's going to include yet, so.
For the clear wells?
For the clear wells, since we haven't done any sort of inspection, it's kind of hard to come up with a design number if we know,
Right.
oh, we just need to go in and patch a couple spots, or if it's major repair, it's two different things, so.
So to keep it clear that we understand, would you do like a task 8A that deals with the leakage that we've already investigated and the solution there? And the 8 would be the examination of the clear wells? We're gonna have to come back and you're gonna have to modify your, I'm assuming modify the bid that's presented, or?
No, we won't need to do that because this task right now had kind of intended, I think it's just the wording that maybe is not clear on my part. So this includes determining, what our options are to inspect the clear wells and then getting that inspection work done. So basically what I would do is from D down, so D to G would just specifically reference the rehab of the contact basins. So we change the terminology.
Okay,
So it would be, D, the design would be preliminary options and cost estimates to address the rehab of the contact basins.
Okay.
So we would change this to rehab of contact basins and inspection of clear wells. We just change the titles. It won't affect the fee.
okay, yeah. I broke it out on the front sheet, like 1 through 6 are basically paperwork and studies, and 7 through 11 are drawings and specifications, and then 12 and 13 are bidding and contract
Correct.
administration.
That's correct.
So, okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so you were working to do a bid solution to the clear wells, and you'll just add the solution for the contact basins?
Contact basins, yes.
You'll add the drawings and specifications for that as that same task?
I can add all that into here, yes.
Just so I understood, that's,
Yeah, so we don't, I guess maybe where the clarification needs to happen is, I'm a little hesitant to do a design fee for the clear wells until we know what the issue is. So, so this would include, I can put a fee in there for that now, what we think it's going to be, and then when we figure out what it is actually going to be required, then we can adjust the contract if necessary, or we can leave it out and do a supplemental agreement for the actual number once we determine what the repairs are gonna look like.
yeah. Because
So-
then, in the clear well, task 8, item E, it does, E and F does say 90% drawings and specifications for the clear wells, and 100% drawings for the specifications. So that's more than a study. Looks like that was proposed to do the total design,
But we'll need to
the
add in,
contact wells,
that was not included in this original
Yeah.
scope, correct? So
That's-
I will look at what, fee would be required for that, but since we've already determined what the requirements are for the fix, we just need to put together plan and specification sheets, which won't be much effort. Since we already have the fix determined, it just needs to be put on paper.
So what you would do is amend your proposal for the 102, 102,000 that
For that
covers
sheet.
this, then you're gonna do an amendment to add the other to the project, right?
We can go ahead and add that one now if you want to. We
But you
can go
don't
ahead
know
and
the
add it.
amount, do you?
I don't know offhand, no, but we
Yeah.
will when we provide you the revised contract. Yes.
Okay, just
So we'll add
so
that
we're
in.
understanding
Sure.
that if 102 includes everything, even the contact basin, or if we're gonna get in it. So we'll get a modification for the
Correct.
contact basin. Good,
Yes, correct.
sure.
Yes.
I just wanna make sure that we're
No,
on the
understood.
same page.
Yep, understood.
So with task 9, the high service building, to construct a barrier to prevent the flooding, you mentioned flood doors. That would be also analyzing the existing walls to make sure they could withstand the pressure of the flood water, and all that's going to be in your report for your recommendation, whether the doors or a separate levee, whatever.
Yeah, we'll be looking
Okay.
at what the options are, and those are the two options we've identified. Correct.
And curious on task 10, the floor coating, are you looking just in epoxy paint, or are you looking at like a epoxy floor coating, like a Desco coating, something more industrial?
More industrial. That's something we go through with city staff. I mean, there's lots of options for those kind of floor coatings. You can put in, grit and various things to make it, slip resistant and those kinds of things as well. So we'll just have a conversation with city staff. We typically do utilize epoxy coatings just because they
Right.
work really well and they stand up really well and they're easy to clean. So it'd be some type of epoxy coating, but as we go through the process, we'll make a determination of what one would work best.
Yeah. Usually they perform a lot longer than the epoxy paint.
Correct. Now, these would be
Industrial,
industrial
yeah.
type coatings that are meant
Okay.
for water treatment plants.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
I think the chemical feed was the chlorine going to a separate building. I think that was clarified when we were out there.
Correct.
So that's going to be a fairly small structure.
Not too small. I don't know if you saw out on the dock is where those ton cylinders are currently. They're pretty large. So it'll be enough to, the building's got to be big enough to house them and the feed equipment, and then make sure that it's easily accessible to be able to change those ton cylinders out. So it's not going to be small, but it won't take up the whole parking lot, if that
So
gives perspective.
400 square feet or?
I think that existing dock right now is like 20 by 70 or so. So it'd be a little bit smaller than that probably, but.
And the boring, you mentioned a couple borings, one for that.
Correct.
Is that just standard because of the type of building we're
We always,
constructing?
anytime we're doing any sort of structure, we like to get a boring to make sure we know exactly what the soil conditions are like. And in particular, since we're building on that area that's, been a parking lot, there's probably quite a bit of fill in there.
Right.
We want to make sure that we know what's there before we design
Okay.
anything around
All
it.
right.
And if there's soil that needs to be taken out and,
Gotcha.
new material put in, we want to know that ahead of time.
Okay.
So, but because of the size of the building, we only need to do one.
And the boring at the lagoon,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about that again.
Sure. So, like I said, we've been going through this process, exact same process with KDHE with other facilities, and KDHE has required us to do a soil boring near the lagoon just so they know what the soil conditions are. So there's no design purpose to that we're not doing anything modifications to the lagoon itself or anything like that. It's just so the KDHE knows what the soil conditions are as part of, that would have been something they would have
Yeah.
required initially, so they just want to have the record of it.
Gotcha.
So basically, it's just to have that soil log that we provide as part of our report.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so they're going to be, we're doing that because they're going to be asking for it,
Correct.
basically.
Yes.
Was there an existing building where the parking lot is?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
When the electrical contractor dug through there, he said there was a lot of brick. There's a lot of debris in there. We don't know how much is in there, so it's very good that they're gonna do a boring and see.
Yeah.
See what's in the soil.
Is there any record that you know exactly where the building was? So the worst thing is to do a boring and hit where the building wasn't, and then you locate the building and find out where it used to be.
I do know where the generator is set now was the original filters.
Okay.
So we know what's under there, but in between
Good.
right now, and we're not sure exactly what's in there.
Yeah. So we need enough boring that we don't get a change order for over excavation and compaction.
Well, and I think with the information that we had from the project that was just done and what Kelly Electric
Yeah.
ran into there and the drawings that we were able to find, that I think, we'll have a
Very
decent
good.
idea. You never know exactly, but we'll at least we'll use all the information we have available to us. Mm-hmm.
So I apologize for jumping around so much,
You're
but
fine.
the items like 5 and 6 that say the filter backwash, I always picture that being, we're bringing dirty water in, we're filtering out some of the dirt, then we're pumping it back into the river. But it's obviously more complicated than that, because they want us to have a permit. We're
Yes.
supposed to have a permit to discharge river water back into the river, because we've added something to it, or?
It will have some chemicals in it.
Okay, because we've done
and
some treatment.
Anytime you discharge water into the river, the state requires it to be permitted or monitored.
We've just never done it.
And it's never been done in the past, and
Okay.
they have started, we're not the only ones, everybody got hit with this
Right.
recently.
So it's something we have to do, but we
We
expect it
have
to
to
be
do.
just a routine. We give them the information, here's our discharge, and they give us the.
Well,
We hope so. I mean, we'll go
Is that a-
through the process and provide all the information they request, and then they may come back and ask for a little something else or, whatever, but we'll do, our intent and our hope is to go through it one time and not have too many back and forths with them, but you just
Right.
don't know.
Okay.
and there'll be levels, like chlorine, if it exceeds a certain level, then we'll have to maybe do some dechlorination and things like that, so.
So part of the task with that is that, KDHE requires some sampling of that water that's being discharged into the river to make, exactly like Terry's talking about, those determinations if anything else has to be done. So that's part of kind of the initial report as well to KDHE of, okay, here's the sampling results, and then
Right.
they make a determination if anything else needs to be done or if we just go straight into permitting at that point, so.
So they're just setting basic minimum levels of what you can feed back into make sure that they're not exceeding what minimum levels that they're gonna establish or they've already established of what can go back into the river. That's all they're looking for is.
Yeah, so basically what the terminology that KDHE uses a lot of times is called anti-degradation, so meaning that I'm not putting anything into the river that's making it worse than it already is, essentially.
Okay.
And so what they're doing with these discharge permits, part of that process is going through and saying, okay, what am I putting back in, which is, hence the sampling of the streams, of the waste streams, to say, okay, this is what's being put into the river, how does that affect the river, do we have any effect on it, yes or no, we're good to go, or no, you need to do this, such as dechlorination or something, to make sure that we're not making the river, changing the chemistry of the river, or changing, the water quality of the river.
So currently, do you have to sample the discharge?
No.
So we could be adding a step that we have to start
Wait,
sampling to monitor.
Yes. Well,
that it-
at the very least, I'm gonna say we'll have to sample and monitor. Yes, this could be adding, or will add some more steps in our treatment
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, so it's understandable, just to protect the river and protect downstream.
Okay, on the sludge line replacement from the clarifier, tell me a little bit more about that one. So, do you have any idea how old that line is? The current one? We don't
I'd have
know.
to look at the plans over there. When
It's older than you,
60-something.
Terry?
Well, much older than
Wow,
mine.
okay, that's ancient.
And it's in really bad shape, coming down that real steep hill.
Yeah.
We've had several separations in there, it keeps
Okay.
blowing out. So.
Is it steel?
No, it's mostly concrete.
It's concrete. Wow.
There's a bunch of
Okay.
concrete pipe in there, clay pipe, it's just a mess.
Okay, I bet it is.
So this was probably from the original water treatment plant, not the 68 plant.
It may be an original drain line and they just used it as, when they added the clarifier.
You said about 100 feet, we think, needs to be replaced?
About 150, I think it was.
150. And what is the typical replacement? It's not concrete, I'm guessing.
No.
No.
No, we would look at probably ductile iron or steel, just depending on what the best option was. So, yeah, we wouldn't go back with concrete down the hill.
So with the line, you identified 150 feet of the existing line that needs to be replaced. The line prior to that, would that have been upgraded when that water plant system went in the 60s?
The section that we're replacing is actually from the clarifier to the first manhole. So there isn't upstream of this pipe,
okay.
it's just the clarifier itself. So
Okay.
we're replacing basically from there to the first manhole in the drain system that it
Okay.
goes to.
Okay.
That section.
Okay, I was confused. I
Mhm.
didn't know whether it extended further up, and you just identified 150 feet of it.
Right, and part of it further towards the sludge basins, we have replaced about 25 years ago. In-house, we had done some of that.
Okay. So this would be probably the last of the piping that hadn't been replaced and needs to.
Yes.
So
For that
could
system.
you say that of all the existing piping that's been replaced since that plant's been in, this is the last phase? Everything else has been upgraded over a
Everything's
period of
been
time?
upgraded over,
With the exception of
over the
this?
last 25 to
25.
30 years.
Okay.
We're not equipped to dig up and down a cliff. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's pretty steep.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the typical lifespan of this line, you're talking about replacing it with?
It depends, but
Depends.
most of the time, I mean, you've still got pipe that's in the ground from 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you've got, steel pipe can last quite a while.
Okay.
I mean, one of the biggest things with steel pipe can be corrosion from the outside, so we protect, any metal pipe we put in the ground, we require it to be wrapped to provide a barrier to the soil, and so it can last quite a while.
Is there sludge flowing through it continually or just every so often we?
No, when we waste sludge off of the clarifier.
Great.
Is that when you have to drain the tank or the clarifier and then wash it out with a hose? Or
No,
is it-
you pull sludge off the clarifier as needed.
Okay.
When we drain it and wash it out, that's just a yearly inspection and
Oh, okay.
cleaning. Kind of a fall house cleaning for us,
Okay.
which they'll be doing here a couple of weeks.
Yeah. 21st, I believe it is.
How exciting.
You're welcome to come out now.
Kelly and Lacey both wanted to, I heard them say.
And we'll use the new fire truck.
Right?
The-
Tower?
The tower.
Yeah.
They actually come out and set
Sweet.
up and
Sweet.
we use it to wash the basins out. And
Sweet.
it works real nice.
From
So
100
they're
feet.
doing it, yeah.
It's, gets training for them and.
Wow.
We could make you a deal on a ladder truck, then you wouldn't have to use the tower.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have to borrow it.
I'll make you a real good deal.
Yeah. No, I don't think we want it.
No, you.
So I would like to ask Kelly or Lacey, I'm not sure who, about signing a contract like this under our new procurement plan. Under our new plan, we would, something this size, we would request proposals.
Lacey, you want to address that? You could, I would have to look at the policy in more detail. PEC has already done a lot of the background work.
Sure.
So you,
Right.
I mean, the work that they've already done with phase 1
Right.
would play into phase 2. I think we lose a lot of continuity between the two, so I don't know if that's our best option for this in particular when you're looking at phases of the project.
Yeah, I wasn't really proposing it for this one. I was just thinking if it was a new one, we
It
would.
was brand new,
Yeah.
but yes. Yep.
Thanks.
And I will add on the inspection of the clear wells, Lacey is a certified diver.
Wow.
And I think she'd be more than willing to get doused with chlorine and go in there.
Not in my job description.
Says any additional duties at
Is it possible to have a list of the projects beginning with phase 1 that we proposed under this loan program? And then we could keep a checklist of where we are.
Sure.
And then it make it easier when we start talking, then we'd kind of be up to speed where we are. Then we can see what's been completed, that if we do jump around, that we can come back and just make it so much easier for us to track. And when you have a multi component project and we're looking at phases, then it'll kind of give us an idea of where we're going and where we have to end up, and
Sure.
maybe reevaluate what needs to be done on some give and take to really address some major or more important issues maybe.
Sure. What I can do, I'll put together a list and I'll start with the things that we'd identified in the initial and preliminary engineering report. Note the ones that were completed, add these things onto it so you can have a running list. Sure.
What would help overall is, if, I think for us commissioners, if we had a notebook with the projects that we're considering, that we could have an index tab so your report becomes, I'm still paper, that I get lost in the computer. When it's off, it's gone. But, we could have a project notebook that had the different projects and the phases and the grant applications that we could keep track of, that, like now, to go back and find your initial report, I've got it somewhere. But if I had a project notebook that tracked our KDOT projects, our ADA projects, our wastewater, our water treatment, it would be so much easier to track that, when we got the contract, I could look back and refresh my memory where we started, where we anticipate to end up, and the same with our road projects that we could add in each year when we submit a grant application to KDOT or anything. But
Sure.
on this, it would really, and I'm throwing that, I'm not adding work for you, Sarah, but
No, I can coordinate with city
Just-
staff and see what all information we need to provide for that notebook, and then we can pull that together.
I don't know, how do the other commissioners?
I think that's good because right now I'm writing down this as far as projects that we've started and completed and projects that are coming up in 2021 and all that.
Sure.
But I'm doing that on my own. So if we had a document that we could just follow, and because I'll come back and say, have we completed this right? Or is this for 2020 or 2021?
Sure.
So it would help keep track of same way with condemnations. I've asked for a list of where we at on them, what's been already condemned, where we at on the process. So it just helps us follow along instead of going back and trying to remember from a meeting 3 months ago. Just easier to keep track of.
Sure. I will say these are usually living
documents, so that's why it's kind of hard to print them out and give you a snapshot in time. That's why, I mean, putting them online is easier, like when I update them.
Sure.
I do it that way. We'll have to reprint fairly often.
She's young, she doesn't like paper.
And not that I don't like
Yeah,
paper,
whatever.
you're just gonna be printing it over and over again, because it will change a lot.
Yeah, and that's, you know, to get online, to go to a website, to search through a website, to find the page, and then to come back and forth with a computer. If I got it in a notebook, I can stick a tab on a sheet and I can turn right to it. I track paper. I don't track electronics. You know, that's just hard for me to operate that way. You know, check set for plans. I print. I use a red pen. I love red. I love the red. I love to write red. And I like that paper where I can see the whole thing. I don't, you know, to enlarge and to scan, I get lost. Yeah, because, you know, the computer goes to sleep. My paper never goes to sleep.
Take it to bed.
Right beside my bed, right there. Yeah.
And Lacey has been tracking our projects on the financial side. She has a spreadsheet that she is doing that, so when you have a start on that, that might be kind of an index for this notebook.
And that would help too, that one of the questions, like where are we on our loan? How much have we spent? You know, to track. I think what I remembered in this, that the fee for this phase 2 is coming out of Fund 10. In Fund 10, is that the loan?
Fund 10 is,
okay.
Yes, the loan. And Sarah, I believe you have a good file tracking that I'll probably just share that.
Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. So what we've got, we track all of so as far as the construction is concerned, I've got an Excel file that has every pay application that they've put in. So it tracks every month they send us a pay application. So we put it in there not only to verify what they send us and make sure it all adds up and all of that, but then it tracks where we're at with the project. So that will tell you what our final cost is on the loan for the construction. And then what I can do is just put kind of a phase 1. Here's what the engineering fee was. Here's what the construction fee was. Here's what the remaining balance is on the existing loan, so that we know going forward.
And for the construction fee, when you document it, it's like if you would do the base contract amount and then addendum 1 with
The change
what
orders
it
that have
is.
been processed.
Yeah,
Sure.
or change order. Yeah, change order 1, lighting. That
Yep.
give a little identification and amount, then would have the total where we are.
And that's how we do it in our spreadsheet, so that's
Yeah.
easy to do. Sure.
See, on that additional paperwork, I know when things have changed, when I was West Star, they had a line construction standard book that was probably like this. And they'd go through, and if they would modify a design print on it, they'd just send you section 101.5. This replaces this document dated May of 2015. And you just insert that, take the old document out, insert the other one in. And you did that with all the modifications in that book, and then you closed it up and you were good to go. So they didn't really give you a reprint of the whole line construction service standards book. They just had the ones where there were changes and modifications made. They just gave you updates of changes, and then you went through and manually inserted, took the old drawing out, put the new one in, and you were good to go. You had the latest updates.
So
Problem.
we have a record management system.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's online.
Okay. Okay. Everything's online.
That we do add all of these addendums and keep record of all of our contracts and changes to those contracts. And then-
Okay. So you're not actually
I don't physically-
recreating the whole document, you're just making the changes on it, that particular,
So the way we do it, I want to be able to see that original contract in its entirety. I want to know exactly how it was contracted to start with, and then you would have a separate document as the addendum. They're probably not all listed in chronological order.
Okay.
But I don't go in and physically replace pages, or even online, replace pages in the original contract, mostly
Okay.
because I want to see what that contract looks like from the beginning.
Okay. That makes
That's how it's
sense.
done right now.
Okay.
But the only thing that would be modifying is the pay summary during construction till you get to the final. And that one sheet could be sent out, but not the whole thing.
And they're labeled, you know,
Yeah.
pay request 1 through, we're on 8 right
Yeah.
now. They're all in there separately with all the corresponding documents and correspondence and documentation.
Could a print in a PDF file to print or to save one page that you want it. If you're trying to be cheap and not get the whole agreement for PDF software, it makes it a pain to try and get that one page out that I want to keep in an electronic file, and I can print and hole punch and a lot quicker. I've always hole punched. Doesn't take much training to punch holes in a paper. I don't think I have any questions other than the modifications for the contract, and then the clarification for the, what'd you call that? The contact basins?
Contact basin, and then we have clarifiers.
Yeah, we got the clear well
Clear
covered in this agreement,
Right.
and we're gonna add the contact basin, right?
And
the
clarifier
clarifiers.
equipment.
And clarifiers.
And
Clarifiers
clarifiers.
added to this.
Okay,
Yeah, so what that, just to refresh your memory on that, during the first phase as part of that initial study, we had the clarifier equipment manufacturer come out and take a look at the clarifier and see what needed to be repaired, replaced on the
Yeah.
equipment and all that. So we have all that information. So again, it's
And
putting it into a
We
plan sheet.
You also had identified a couple of sections of clarifier that need some repair.
Repair on the metal.
Sandblasting and painting,
Right.
coatings, just
the
Protect
clarifier
it.
is a big steel vessel out in the,
in the middle of that
Metal.
one basin that
Yeah.
that has, basically, that's where we pulled a lot of the dirt out of the water. And
okay, and the contact basin is the big water enclosure, all that whole
right,
area.
right
The other
behind the
side, on the
building
other
area,
side.
right? Those
Yeah.
are the contact
Okay.
basins.
Now that was where I was having turn problems.
Do an aerial and then label what all those are. Maybe
Sure.
on an aerial, and it'd probably be easier if they had that visual.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, and that
Be
could
sure to
go-
punch holes in it.
And that could go right on the first page after water treatment plant tab. See?
I thought you put it on the cover, you know, where you slide it.
Oh, no, I'm thinking, I want one notebook. One
Can you
notebook.
virtually punch holes in those documents?
I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out.
Probably, like, you know, and just virtually transport it to a virtually created binder behind a virtual tab. You do that? Behind a virtual tab? Is that possible?
We could give you all Kindles and put it on there.
That's not paper.
One day I was out of the office and I came in and two employees were working on a computer and they had their back to the door, and when I come in they turn and look, and this sheepish look like, uh-oh. And I look at the monitor and it's got like 5 or 6 Post-its on the screen. The screen is off. They had changed something, but it's odd to see a Post-it on a computer screen. I knew I was in trouble then. But
Okay, Gary, you have any other
I'm good.
questions?
Thank you.
You're good?
no, that was it.
Okay, so we'll work with city staff, get a revised draft contract back to city staff, verify
Okay.
that we've got all the scope items and everything correct. We're good to go there, and then we'll send that back to you guys for consideration, and I'll get in touch with Cornerstone for the sub
Okay.
information, so.
Great, sounds like a good plan. Sarah, thank you very much for
You're
the
welcome.
presentation.
thank you.
Terry, thank you for sitting up here and clarifying some questions that we had. And Lacey, I'm still looking for that virtual three-ring binder and the hole punch.
We can have a training session.
Okay.
And I'll show you.
I'm in.
Dream on, Lacey.
All right, with that, we're basically going to table
Table any action on the contract.
table any action on the contract. Thank you, Kelly. And with that, we're ready for an adjournment. So I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Thanks.